A strange tale was about to be shared with the guests. There was a story everyone in Huiran whispered about, one that began in a valley beneath the royal palace where ghosts were said to roam. In the palace there lived 3 princes. The first prince, Sarion, was bright but sickly. The second prince, Jahyeon, was a skilled martial artist. The third prince, Shinyul, possessed a beauty so captivating it could charm even the most wicked of ghosts. However, due to his devious disposition, the third prince seduced the king's concubine and made her bear his child. The king was furious and ordered the prince out of his sight once and for all. The protagonist of the story was the newborn child, Princess Soru, who had been abandoned overnight. Since the king could not bring himself to kill a child of his own flesh and blood, he had her raised by his lowliest servants. He named her Soru, a name meaning tears and troubles, because she was born from tears and was nothing but a cause for concern. Princess Soru's troubles did not end there. Day in and day out, the princess would holler about her hallucinations, claiming a ghost had come to devour her. The servants whispered that she must have lost it, or was perhaps possessed by a ghost, saying she gave them the creeps. Eventually, the king grew tired of the situation and ordered her to be thrown in prison to starve to death. The king thought everything had been settled, but then the 10th night came. A bolt of lightning devastated the entire palace. Fires raged, but surprisingly, the princess survived. In fact, she was miraculously unscathed. Then something eerie happened, and a bizarre tune began to play. It was a song that claimed if a monster ate Princess Soru, they would be granted a new body. All the demons of Huiran began to fight over the princess, eager to swallow her whole. However, the most hideous monster of them all gobbled up the other demons instead, leaving no space in his stomach for the princess. So instead, he stole the princess's eyes and fled somewhere far away. The princess woke up with a jolt, wondering if it had all been a dream. She felt a terrible certainty that bad things were about to happen again and worried about anyone else getting hurt. Meanwhile, someone was angrily questioning how King Jahyeon dared to do this to him. He loudly declared that a king was only a king if he acted like one, and was furious that a sly fox was sitting on the throne. A companion tried to ease the tension, saying he had told him to calm down, but his hot head would not cool. The angry man stated he had fought like a dog on the God-forsaken battlefield for 1 whole year. He did it because His Majesty had promised him the princess. He reminded the king that he had promised to accept him as his son-in-law if he beheaded the enemy general, and pleaded for the king to keep his promise. The king smirked and replied that he had only promised he would be allowed to have a princess. Never that. It would be Garan. Instead, he told the man to take Princess Soru. The man clenched his fists in frustration. His companion asked what he would do now, or if he would stage a revolt. The man declared that he would not stand for this humiliation. The companion advised him to let it go this once, pointing out that King Jahyeon might have played him, but at least he couldn't mistreat him anymore. He then went on to say that the reason for his situation was his lack of power and his unremarkable social standing. He reminded the man that while his combat skills were great, he didn't actually hold any power. He knew this was true, and that was why he had gone to the battlefield in the first place. His companion explained that marrying a princess, even just for show, would make him a member of the royal family, and soon nobody would be able to look down on his authority. The man clenched his jaw, but then he shoved the companion away. He yelled for Beryung to stop trying to coax him into doing things his way. He argued that everyone knew getting involved with the ghost girl meant death. He was adamant that he would never get married to that ghostly wench. The princess was left alone, curled up, and abandoned. The companion watched the angry man walk away, musing that he was never going to mature and grow out of that foul temper. He asked if his friend really wanted to sacrifice his entire family just to bring down the king. Stepping closer, he asked Jahyeon if he was really going to forsake innocent lives just to kill a single foe. He insisted he wasn't telling him to give up on revenge, but simply asked why he would choose a fool's path. Jahyeon shot back that his companion was clearly just trying to use him as his pawn. His friend sighed, pretending to be exasperated, and asked if he really thought this was only for his own benefit. He told Jahyeon to consider a new idea. If he truly couldn't stand Princess Soru, he could simply send her far away after the wedding. Then, once he gained enough power, he could still make Garan his first wife. That way, he wouldn't lose a thing. And his companion asked again if he was still planning to kill King Garyun. Jahyeon didn't answer, prompting the companion to shrug with a knowing grin and say he could suit himself. Back at her desolate chamber, Princess Soru was still being tormented by the ghostly presence. The voice mocked her, saying she was like a living corpse, and that it made the spirit want to feast on her flesh even more. She told the presence that she had already told it countless times to go on and eat her if it wished. The voice lamented that it would be killed if it ate her, calling it frustrating. The voice then darkly considered hanging one of the servants instead to help take off the edge. The princess screamed for the presence to leave the innocent alone and to kill her instead. Her plea was immediately followed by a chorus of whispering voices that echoed all her fears and the cruelty she had faced. They taunted her, claiming everything was her fault, calling her a vile ghost princess and a cursed girl, saying everyone died because of her. They whispered that if only it weren't for her. Suddenly, a servant was asking if she was awake and told her the king was calling for her and that she must hurry. The princess wondered why the king would call for her all of a sudden, fearing he had finally decided to kill her. She wondered why now. A different servant rushed in, apologizing for the intrusion and insisting there wasn't much time. The servants whispered nervously to each other about being cursed. The princess looked up, a dark and bitter smile spreading across her face. She thought that she actually didn't mind what happened, thinking the king could end this hellish life for all she cared. The servants helped her up and led her away, insisting the reason for the summons didn't matter. She silently realized that even if the king was doing this on a whim, she was still grateful for the possibility of an end. They had arrived and told her to come this way, close her eyes, tilt her head, and pout her lips. The princess was confused, wondering what was going on. As a servant reached out to grab her, she instinctively flinched and pulled away. The maid was flustered and explained they were only helping her get dressed. She informed the princess that today was her wedding day, and she would be marrying Jahyeon, the eldest son of the Jah family. The news shocked her, and she wondered if she was truly getting married. She thought the man must have committed a crime, but the servant quickly corrected her, explaining Jahyeon was a war hero, not a criminal. He had simply asked for her hand in marriage as a reward for his victory. The ghostly presence laughed again, saying that wasn't possible. The spirit reasoned that the war hero had probably asked for Garan, the princess they said was as beautiful as an angel from the heavens, and that the king must have been unwilling to give her away. The voice then gleefully asked Soru how it should kill her new husband. She winced, feeling pity for the poor guy, realizing he saved the country, but his only reward would likely be death because of her. The demons around her boasted that they would eat him first, then his family and friends, promising a never-ending symphony of cries that day. The servant apologized again, sweating nervously, and urged the princess to hurry. The princess accepted that her mere existence was enough to cause others misfortune. The maids dressed her in a magnificent wedding gown and adorned her with a grand floral headdress. She thought to herself that if she only existed to bring harm, she wondered why she was even born. She watched the door creak open as they let her out. She hoped that once this wedding ended, if she was lucky, the demons would leave her husband alone. It was then that she promised herself she would finally put an end to her wretched existence once and for all. Before she could finish the thought, something flashed past her eyes, and a figure appeared before her. A handsome man in fine clothes. Looking down at her, she stood there, completely shocked, wondering what just happened. While a crowd of demons gathered, preparing for their feast, one of the grotesque, shadowy figures noticed something strange. It told its companion that every demon set on the princess had suddenly disappeared, feeling that something wasn't right. The other demon, Bloody and impatient, agreed to stick to the plan. He complained he couldn't wait any longer, dripping blood from his hand, saying he was far too hungry. The princess was then escorted out by the servants, arriving at the brightly lit courtyard where the king waited. She was met by Jahyeon, the man she was forced to marry. As the heavy palace doors creaked open for her, Jahyeon watched her intently. He noted silently that she was smaller, plainer, and more normal than he had expected, believing the rumors had exaggerated her ghostly appearance. A servant ordered her to stand in the proper place for the ceremony. The king then angrily scolded her for daring to lift her head in his presence, calling her daft and saying he thought she was merely blind. The entire courtyard seemed to hold its breath as the princess flinched and immediately bowed her head. Jahyeon realized the rumors about her being constantly scolded were true. He assured himself that none of it was his concern, intending to send her away as soon as the wedding was over. The wedding ceremony proceeded, which Jahyeon found to be an exhausting flurry of noise and activity. He sighed, knowing there was just one last street procession before the ceremony would finally be complete. As the palace gates opened, a crowd of citizens gathered to murmur and whisper, staring at him. Jahyeon's eyes widened with intense frustration. He heard the people whispering that the king had tricked him into marrying the ghost princess. The crowd pitied him, claiming that crossing paths with the wench meant certain death, suggesting the Jah family's days were numbered. Jahyeon clenched his fists, struggling to control his anger as he listened to their mockery. He began to stomp away, ignoring the confused calls of a guard asking where he was going. The moment he turned, masked figures in black, assassins, ambushed the procession, attacking everyone in sight. Screams erupted from the terrified servants and onlookers as the assassins launched their assault. One of the men lunged at the princess, knocking her to the ground with a thump. She was lying there, completely overwhelmed by the chaos, hearing screams and crashes as the demons around her began going berserk. She realized the demons and monsters were hurting people. Another assassin grabbed her tightly, telling her that she was coming with him and that it was on his master's orders. She struggled and tried to ask whose orders they were. Before the assassin could move, Jahyeon appeared. He furiously yelled for the man to be gone. He sliced at the assassin with his sword, who immediately crumpled and fell to the ground. The princess watched, covered in blood, utterly stunned. She was completely shocked, realizing a human had just sliced a demon. He could even make them disappear. She wondered how this was even possible. Jahyeon quickly wiped the blood from his face as the fighting erupted around them, engaging the assassins with his sword. He expertly leaped and dodged their attacks, slicing through them. He wondered who these figures were. He observed that their attire and fighting style were completely unfamiliar to him. He knew no thief would be foolish enough to rob the royal palace, so he considered if this was actually a rebellion. Shrugging off his confusion, he flashed a blood-soaked smirk, declaring that the motivation didn't matter since he was already in the mood for a fight. He plunged directly into the battle, fighting the masked men surrounding him. Jahyeon spotted his guards hesitating and shouted at them, asking if they were afraid of a little scuffle and ordering them to draw their swords immediately. They quickly obeyed. Meanwhile, Bir-young dashed toward the scene, sighing with a throbbing headache from all the commotion. Jahyeon yelled at him to hurry as well. Just then, someone shouted that the building had caught on fire. Jahyeon cursed the attackers, realizing that if he chased after them now, they would lose the chance to put out the blaze. He gritted his teeth, saying he didn't care about the palace, but that if they didn't act quickly, the entire city could burn down. He immediately ordered his men to bring water from the pond to extinguish the fire. The soldiers looked confused, asking about the rebels. He sighed, telling them to put out the fire first, but to tie up any stragglers they came across. As the soldiers hurried off to follow his commands, Bir-young commented that Jahyeon certainly lived up to his reputation as a war hero, noting how the soldiers relied on him more than their own commanding officer. Jahyeon grumbled that the soldiers were just lazy. Bir-young then noticed Jahyeon looked injured and asked if he was hurt. Jahyeon angrily told him to shut up and mind his own business. Bir-young was hurt, pointing out that this was a terrible way to treat a worried best friend. He then suddenly noticed the princess sitting on the ground nearby and quietly asked Jahyeon if that wasn't his wife. Jahyeon turned around. Soru was on the ground, struggling to stand as she watched the chaos. Bir-young scoffed at Jahyeon, asking why he didn't go help her. Jahyeon glared at him, repeating Bir-young's statement and claiming that if he was so worried, he could help her himself. He added that he would be sending her far away anyway, so he would prefer to keep his distance. Soru was stunned, and her voice cracked as she repeated the shocking words. He was sending her far away. She slowly turned toward him, tears welling up in her eyes, pleading with him not to abandon her. Jahyeon flinched at the sight of her raw emotion and the despair in her plea. Jahyeon stared down at the crying princess, his jaw clenched tight with frustration. He asked why he should help her, coldly stating that he never wanted her to be his wife in the first place. He was furious that this marriage had made him the laughingstock of the kingdom. He told her to stay in line and live like a corpse. Bir-young hurried over to Jahyeon, sighing dramatically. He noted that Jahyeon wasn't usually so cold-hearted and realized he must be extremely irritated by the entire situation. He watched as Jahyeon walked away, but Soru grasped the edge of his flowing robe, stopping him immediately. Tears streamed down her face as she told him she knew he didn't want her, and that she didn't expect him to treat her like a wife or expect anything more from him. Jahyeon clenched his jaw, and a shadow of the inner monster seemed to flicker around Soru as she trembled. Jahyeon harshly asked how she could be so selfish, suggesting she was okay with others dying as long as she was comfortable. He said he knew the rumors that simply standing next to her was enough to get cursed, reminding her that even her own family avoided her. He asked how she could expect him to take her in. He was about to accuse her of not being satisfied after killing all those palace servants, but Soru cut him off, crying that it wasn't true and that he had it all wrong. Reaching out, Soru desperately tried to explain that she had never in her life seen anyone like him. She told him his energy was like the blazing sun, powerful enough not only to fight back against the demons, but even to keep them at bay. Weeping openly, Soru admitted that he was right. Everyone around her did die. She recalled that the woman who raised her was torn to shreds, and the kindly child who once offered her food had her neck snapped. She felt her sins were beyond reckoning, and that she deserved to live like a corpse. But even so, she desperately grabbed his gold-trimmed sleeve and begged him, saying that if she were by his side, she might be able to live without hurting anyone or making anyone sad. She pleaded with Jahyeon to please help her. Bir-young leaned in close to Jahyeon, whispering that he would need the princess for his revenge anyway, suggesting he should take her in for now. Soru, perhaps hearing Bir-young's words, asked Jahyeon if he only thought she was useless. She quickly stated that she could be useful for one thing. Soru quickly grabbed Jahyeon's injured hand and brought it to her lips. She told him her blood could heal any wound. Jahyeon stared in disbelief at his hand where Soru had pressed her mouth. He was astonished to see that his wound had truly healed. He shouted, asking how this was possible. Soru looked up at him, saying the demons called her blood their river and her flesh their land. She wiped her teary eyes and asked if this wasn't enough to make her useful to him. Before Jahyeon could respond, Bir-young chimed in with a slight grin. He told Jahyeon not to be ridiculous, but agreed that Soru's ability would come in quite handy. He added that since they were husband and wife now, of course they should live together. Bir-young tried to put a hand on Jahyeon's shoulder, patting him and laughing that he could be grouchy, but wasn't entirely made of stone. Jahyeon turned to walk away, but Bir-young rushed forward, quietly urging him to be practical. He asked if Jahyeon wanted revenge on the king or not. Jahyeon let out a frustrated sound and finally gave in. Gritting his teeth, he told Soru he would let her stay. He repeated her earlier promise, warning her not to expect to be treated like the lady of the house. Soru quickly swore that she wouldn't covet anything that belonged to him. Jahyeon turned and walked off, leaving the princess behind. Soru was overwhelmed with relief and gratitude, saying she was truly grateful and forever in his debt. Jahyeon silently heard her words as he walked away, confused as to why she was so thankful when he was only using her for his own purposes. Meanwhile, two demons were discussing the situation. One complained that they couldn't go near the princess anymore because of that guy. The other, Shinyul, the third prince, now manifesting in the form of the most hideous monster of them all, asked what their plan was, before suddenly killing the complaining demon with a brutal thwack. He watched the blood splatter and dripped before he began to devour the dead demon, crunching and munching on the flesh. He wiped the blood from his mouth and instructed the remaining demon to keep his eyes peeled for an opening. Shinyul muttered that the hunger wouldn't fade, while the demon next to him trembled, seemingly in fear or anticipation. Shinyul whispered Soru's name. The scene shifted to Jahyeon's residence on a bright early morning. Biryung cheerfully told Jahyeon, who was immersed in his work, that he had told him so. He noted there was a bustling line of people past the front gate who wanted to gain Jahyeon's favor. Jahyeon grumbled that because of that, he was up to his neck in work while his aide just happily watched people. Biryung countered that he had been working tirelessly to help Jahyeon gain power. Jahyeon accused him of just trying to fulfill his own ambitions. Biryung indignantly insisted he was just planning ahead because Jahyeon had made enemies with the king. He added that Jahyeon didn't understand how politics worked. He reminded Jahyeon that he couldn't just stop now that guests were lined up outside, emphasizing that he needed to maintain his authority. Jahyeon asked if Biryung wasn't overcomplicating things, but Biryung was certain King Garyeon was thinking the same way. Biryung warned that Jahyeon's authority wouldn't last long. Jahyeon was momentarily stunned, but Biryung quickly added that it wasn't too late to bow and beg the king. Jahyeon slammed his hand down and angrily refused to ever bow down to that bastard. Biryung smiled and said that settled it then. He presented Jahyeon with a rolled-up scroll, explaining it was a list of influential local figures, merchants, and distinguished officials. Biryung explained these were the people Jahyeon needed to get on his side. Jahyeon doubted that anyone would risk falling out of the king's favor just to side with him. Biryung pointed out that this wasn't necessarily true now that Jahyeon had the ghost princess. Jahyeon grew tense, asking what he meant. Biryung grinned and revealed that the list consisted only of people who had sick family members or who were sick themselves. He stated that nothing was more important than staying alive. Biryung concluded that if Jahyeon offered them a cure, they would gladly do his bidding. He then paused, asking if Jahyeon felt bad for the princess. Biryung laughed that while he felt bad, a man had to stay realistic. He looked at Jahyeon's serious expression and teasingly asked if he had caught feelings for her already. Jahyeon shouted back that was absurd, pointing out he hadn't even seen her since their wedding. Biryung responded that was perfect, meaning there was no reason to dismiss his idea. He gave Jahyeon the final decision. Soru's previous promise about not coveting anything that belonged to him echoed in Jahyeon's mind. Jahyeon pondered why he was hesitating to use Soru, considering that he was the one who had declared he would do whatever it took to achieve his goals. He finally turned to Biryung and told him to go ahead and proceed as he saw fit. Biryung was thrilled and began drawing up the letters immediately. Biryung then paused and told Jahyeon to treat Soru well. Jahyeon reminded him that Biryung was the one who warned him about catching feelings. Biryung quickly clarified that he was only asking him to go easy on her because if she decided to leave, their entire plan would be ruined. He emphasized that the princess played a vital role in their strategy, telling Jahyeon that a great fortune had fallen into his lap and he would be a fool to throw it away. Jahyeon reluctantly conceded the point. Meanwhile, Soru was sitting quietly in her new humble residence. A new maid named Yumi approached her nervously, introducing herself and saying she had come to help Soru freshen up. Yumi said she would start by wiping Soru's hands. As she worked, she asked Soru if she wasn't sad at all. She noted that Jahyeon hadn't come to see her even the day after their wedding. She continued that he was always saying he was too busy with his disciples, leaving Soru all alone day after day. Soru dismissed the comment as nonsense. She insisted that Jahyeon had accepted her despite not wanting her, and that he was her savior. Yumi argued that Soru was his wife now and deserved to be treated that way. But Soru firmly believed she had never been shown such kindness in her life. In the secluded place where nothing could be heard but the breeze, Soru reflected on her past. She worried about who the demons would kill next, and if it would be her fault again. She remembered the miserable place she was trapped in, and how Jahyeon was the one who showed her the light, allowing her to bathe in his warmth. She felt she owed him an unrepayable debt and had nothing but gratitude for him. Yumi suddenly realized she had been wrong to believe the rumors that Soru was a scary person. She eagerly asked if anything else was troubling Soru, promising to help in any way she could. Soru, fumbling nervously with her hands, quietly asked if Yumi could fetch her a few flower seeds. She admitted she wanted to smell the scent of flowers, but wasn't sure if she deserved such a luxury. Yumi was delighted to help, grabbing Soru's hand and promising to bring back as many seeds as she could find. Soru felt a beam of happiness and sincerely thanked her. Back at his own residence, Jahyeon ordered his servants to send everyone out and bring Soru to him at once. He told a servant that his disciple had suffered a lethal head injury from a horse kick and was unlikely to recover before sundown. Jahyeon realized this was a good opportunity to test Soru's powers. He thought that if she could save someone on the verge of death, she would have no problem curing the people on Biryung's list. Jahyeon internally cursed himself for using her this way, feeling he was no better than Biryung. When Soru arrived, dressed simply in a pale purple robe, Jahyeon noted that she looked like a child dressed in a lady's outfit. He told her he had something he needed her to do, and she felt a sudden blush of emotion, thinking he actually needed her. He showed her the injured disciple, explaining the lethal head injury and asking if she could save him. Soru stared at the injured man in shock, explaining that she had never had the chance to use her ability because people always kept their distance from her. Jahyeon grew impatient and muttered that he should have expected nothing from this runt and told her to forget it. Soru immediately begged him, asking if he would at least let her try just once. Jahyeon was thrown off by her intense pleading, feeling like she was accusing him of harassment. He reluctantly gave in, rummaging through his things and reaching out to offer her a small knife. Soru was confused, asking why he gave her a knife. Jahyeon explained it was better than biting her lip and instructed her to press her finger against the blade. Soru slashed her finger instantly, and Jahyeon's eyes widened in surprise and a slight gasp. He yelled at her, yanking her hand away and asking what she was doing. Jahyeon quickly yanked Soru's hand away, demanding to know what she was doing. She replied that she thought he wanted her to heal his disciple's wound. He sighed heavily, but told her to carry on. Soru cautiously dabbed her dripping blood onto the unconscious man's lethal head injury. Biryung anxiously watched and asked if it had worked. Soru fiddled nervously with her hands and told him that the man seemed to be breathing easier, suggesting he check for himself. Jahyeon's face reflected sheer shock as he observed the disciple's wound healing completely, as if it had never been there in the first place. He thought that Soru's ability transcended human limits, wondering exactly who this woman was. Jahyeon noticed that the cut on Soru's own hand was still dripping blood and wondered if she was incapable of healing her own wounds. Biryung, having been told by Jahyeon to treat her well earlier, saw Jahyeon's serious expression and quietly worried that Jahyeon using Soru for his purposes was not right. Soru, completely focused on the patient, offered to give the man more of her blood. Jahyeon simply patted her head and told her, "Well done." Soru looked up at him, startled and confused by the small act of kindness. Jahyeon, equally bewildered by his own gesture, wondered what he was doing and if he should keep petting her. Soru blushed slightly and averted her gaze. She then meekly asked Jahyeon if she had been of any help. Jahyeon assured her that she had saved a man who was at death's door, confirming she was a great deal of help. The princess was overcome with happiness, realizing she had actually been helpful. Jahyeon turned to walk away, saying he would call for someone to escort her back and that medicine would be sent to her quarters for her cut. The next morning, Bir-young was overjoyed by the wonderful news of Soru's healing ability. He immediately urged Jahyeon to write to the #1 candidate on their list. This man was known as Hwiran's finest merchant, but his young daughter suffered from a mysterious disease. Bir-young was certain the merchant would come running if they offered him a cure, which would ensure Jahyeon would never have to worry about money again. Jahyeon hesitated, looking at his healed hand, reminding himself that Soru's cut likely hadn't healed yet. Bir-young dismissed the concern, stating it would be foolish to wait for her to get better after all that had happened. Jahyeon asked what he should write. Bir-young told him to offer a potent elixir, stressing that Jahyeon must not give away any details about the remedy, because the merchant would be appalled to know it was human blood. Jahyeon questioned if this deceit would actually work. Bir-young confidently said not to worry, explaining that people would do anything to stay alive, even if it meant consuming human flesh, and that everything would work out. He added that there was no better way of getting close to someone than sharing a secret they weren't proud of. As they waited, the merchant, a handsome man with a beard and long hair, quickly arrived, rushing past Bir-young. He told Jahyeon that, since he already knew about his daughter's illness, he would get straight to the point and begged Jahyeon to sell him the elixir at any price. Jahyeon, seeing the merchant's desperation, told him that the remedy was not something that could be bought and sold. Bir-young was shocked that Jahyeon would say that after calling the merchant all the way there. Jahyeon, ignoring Bir-young's frustration, instructed him to tell Soru to come in. Bir-young was stunned, realizing Jahyeon was going to use the princess. Soru entered the room, simply asking if he had called for her.